A question that's been asked and a tale that's been told is that Bugsy Siegel invented Las Vegas. It's not true. Bugsy invented Las Vegas excess, but not right away. Legalized gaming started in the city in 1931, and Bugsy was too busy with running booze and doing hits to even consider the little town in the desert. But things changed in the 1940s. Las Vegas, with its multifaceted hotel, casino, dining, and showroom attractions, might have just taken a few more years to grow without Bugsy. Or perhaps it never would have reached its spectacular heights without his input. Mostly a cascade of money that flowed like Niagara Falls raining $100 bills. It was expensive to build the Flamingo Casino. It was Bugsy's legacy and his undoing. Benjamin Bugsy Siegel was born in February of '06 in the definitively poor Williamsburg neighborhood of Brooklyn. By the age of 10, the streets were his home, spending most of his time staying out of trouble, but of course that didn't last long. In a world where tough kids ruled and weak kids ran home crying when they could, Ben never cried, but he did steal. You didn't have to enter a store to steal in Lower Manhattan. You only had to be faster and smarter than the pushcart vendors on the street. When Ben partnered with Mo Sedway, they continued stealing from the vendors, but stopped other toughs from harassing their flock and convinced the vendors to pay them $1 a week for protection. If the vendors balked, their pushcarts were overturned, often burned. Most of them paid. Ben moved up in local gang ranks, reaching highs with Meyer Lansky and Prohibition during booze running, fulfilling his hits as the brains behind Murder Incorporated, a group of killers, including Abe Relis, who personified the murderous gangster life and death. While Lansky and Siegel worked closely with Lucky Luciano, Relis stayed a rung below, commanding the Murder Incorporated brethren and doing at least a dozen killings of his own. Siegel, who had been given the name Bugsy by newspaper reporters for his purported hot temper and maniacal way of dealing with trouble, rape, robbery, beatings, murder, headed to the West Coast in 1936 to expand gaming in Los Angeles. Bugsy didn't have any interest in Las Vegas at the time. Vegas was sweltering hot half the year, and air conditioning was a thing of the future. Los Angeles had beautiful skies, no traffic, and it was an open city. Ben could do whatever he wanted. He didn't arrive with plans to be a movie star, but he knew where the money was, and the people he hobnobbed with knew who he was. It made for easy pickings. He rolled over Hollywood moguls like Louis B. Mayer of MGM Studios like a steamroller, getting loans from dozens of big shots with absolutely no intention of ever paying them back. It was a good life. Although Bugsy wanted California to himself, there was too much money in Hollywood, and a whole slew of crimes was raining down on the town, mostly from the Chicago outfit. Eventually, after pocketing millions, top bosses Frank Nitti and Paul Ricca were tried and convicted for extortion. Nitti killed himself rather than spend 10 years in a tiny jail cell. Ricca took his sentence and appointed Tony Accardo boss, with Sam Giancana as number 2. Siegel took note of that and moved away from extortion and took over Chicago's race wire that supplied the nation's bookies. And he tried to transform himself away from crime, but worried that his old co-worker at Murder Incorporated, Abe Relis, would rat him out. Abe Relis was under federal indictment and agreed to testify against known killers. Several got jail or death sentences. For 18 months, Relis was kept with other informants in safe houses. Before getting to the Lepke Bookwalter case, where Bugsy would be connected to at least aiding and abetting, Relis died in a 6-story fall from his heavily guarded room in the Half Moon Hotel overlooking Coney Island. Although he may have tried to escape, his body landed 20 feet from the base of the hotel wall. Many believe he was thrown out the window. He had a $100,000 bounty on his head, and somebody probably connected and collected. Bugsy was still tried in the murder of mobster Harry Greenberg, but he was acquitted in '42. Upon release, Siegel turned to Las Vegas. In the 1930s and 40s, Vegas was like Reno. There were bars, saloons, bare wood floors, and tiny casinos. As late as the 1980s, Reno pit bosses wore cowboy hats, cowboy boots, stylish jackets, Old West design. Not at Harrah's or the Mapes, but certainly at the Comstock and Harold's Club. Las Vegas moved away from the Old West theme in 1946 when Bugsy opened the Flamingo. But it wasn't easy. The Flamingo was the third casino on the Las Vegas Strip, joining the El Rancho Vegas and the Hotel Last Frontier, which looked like they sounded. They had split rail fencing around the property, covered wagons in their advertising, and one even had a chuck wagon buffet. The Flamingo had class. They offered style, and it was all stolen from the mind of William Wilkerson, who started the crazy idea of bringing Los Angeles posh to the desert. But he couldn't do it alone. He didn't have the money or the know-how. It never would have happened if not for Bugsy's 20 years of crime and murder. Not without his connections to Lucky Luciano, Frank Nitti, Paul the Waiter Rica, and Tony Accardo. And not without his lifelong friendship with mob money man, Meyer Lansky. Wilkerson was a famous restaurateur. He owned the swank Ciro's Hot Spot in L.A., and he owned the newspaper The Hollywood Reporter. He was also a degenerate gambler. Not only did he decide he should build the ultimate resort casino on the Las Vegas Strip, but he managed to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars in downtown Las Vegas casinos, most of which were controlled by Bugsy Siegel in the early 1940s. Siegel was bold. He was persuasive. He was scary. He and Mo Sedway pushed their way into several properties, including the Las Vegas Club, where they set up shop and spoke about their plans from an office the FBI had wired. The FBI called it the Boiler Room. Then the men convinced J. Kell Hassels to sell them the El Cortez at 6th and Fremont Street for $600,000 in early 1945. They partnered with Meyer Lansky and Gus Greenbaum, who came down from Phoenix to run the property. Then Davy Berman showed up with his brother and a satchel of cash from Minneapolis and took a third. Willie Icepick Alderman came along as muscle. Shortly thereafter, William Wilkerson started dumping thousands of dollars at the El Cortez crap games weekly. It was meant to be. While Wilkerson may have started the Flamingo project, it ground to a halt as his luck at the tables ended. He even lost a personal loan against construction provided by Howard Hughes. So what Wilkerson saw as a disaster, Siegel saw as a perfect opportunity, and convinced Wilkerson to accept his $1 million wire transfer for a share of the casino. As the months rolled by, Bugsy went wild on construction costs, new designs, expensive decorations suggested by his girlfriend, Virginia Hill, and he had to front another $1 million in costs. When he had tapped out his own resources, Siegel hit up Meyer Lansky, Tony Accardo, and Isidore Blumenfeld in Minneapolis. When costs hit $4 million, he incorporated the Nevada Projects Corporation, squeezing Wilkerson's share to almost nothing. When he still needed cash, the FBI noted that he was making trips to Chicago, New York, Miami, and Minneapolis again. Then he bounced checks to Del Webb, his construction company. Although it was the last resort, Bugsy asked J. Kell Hassels to buy back the El Cortez Casino for $770,000. Hassels thought it was a good opportunity to stay alive and went for the deal. Then, under extreme pressure from Luciano and Meyer Lansky, the Flamingo Casino finally opened on December 26, 1946. It only had a casino and a showroom with a small restaurant. No hotel rooms were finished, but Bugsy almost was. Luciano called the growing list of mob bosses who had a share of the Flamingo to meet in Havana, Cuba to discuss the problem of cost overruns and possible theft of cash. Virginia Hill had taken several trips to Paris, likely with money in suitcases. Bugsy was on a tightrope. After a disastrous opening of the Flamingo that saw torrential rains in Los Angeles and stopped Bugsy's waiting planes full of rich gamblers, only locals saw the floor show featuring Xavier Cugat, Jimmy Durante, and baby Rose Marie, and money leaked everywhere. The players won, the slots paid out, the dealers stole, and the property was losing $300,000 by the time the new year rolled around. Bugsy closed the casino and construction restarted with a new opening date set for March 1st. Slowly but surely, construction finished. The casino reopened, and things looked better. But it was too late. Bugsy's enormously profitable race wire competition between the two giants was squashed by the Chicago outfit, and they now controlled one national wire. They didn't need Bugsy as a front man, and they didn't need him running a casino in the desert that was losing money. By then he had too many enemies, and even Meyer Lansky's pleading with Luciano couldn't help him. Bugsy was gunned down in Virginia Hill's home in Beverly Hills while calmly reading the newspaper. 9 shots rang through a window. Several hit him in the chest. One sent his eye skittering across the floor. The best guess is that Mo Sedway arranged the hit, using Frankie Carbo as a driver and an unknown sharpshooter at the window of the living room. The hit left Bugsy less handsome, but more famous than ever. His picture was splashed across newspapers and magazines for weeks. The moment Ben Siegel's death was confirmed, the Flamingo was taken over by Gus Greenbaum, Davy Berman, and Morris Rosen. Sanford Adler of the El Rancho Vegas casino up the street was chosen to front the club, but he thought too much of his position, and Mo had to knock him down a few times before he picked up and headed to Reno, where he still had some influence. With Siegel's death, money skimmed from the count rooms finally started making its way to Meyer Lansky so he could divvy it up between mob families of New York, Chicago, Kansas City, and Miami. While Siegel's cash dried up, Lansky was reported to have saved nearly $300 million from his decades of involvement with the mob and the casinos from New York to the newly legal clubs of Nevada. Who ended up with the lion's share of that cash after Lansky died in 1983 has never been established. There were many safety deposit boxes in Geneva. Who owned them? Who knows? As for Vegas, the transformation from cowboy bunkhouse to L.A. swank was accomplished with William Wilkerson's ideas and Siegel's money and connections. Bugsy didn't invent Vegas, but he sure made it popular. Thanks for watching Nevada Gaming History's look at Ben Siegel and the Flamingo Casino. If you want more detailed information on Bugsy and his mob cohorts in Las Vegas, please pick up a copy of Vegas and the Mob at your favorite bookstore or on Amazon.